we're back on the road this April with our live show, Cocaine Cowboys. If you want to hear the story of Ireland's love affair with Colombian powder and those who made millions in the gold rush, limited availability remains in Belfast at ulsterhall.co.uk. That's ulsterhall.co.uk. I'm glad the two of you have laptops and notepads because, as you can see, I have nothing. I'm absolutely freezing.
Yeah.
I think we have to do something with this studio. It's like an ice box. Niall, you're like as if you're on the beach.
Niall likes it. It's for Niall's fans.
Yeah.
Look, I like to change in my outfits. I like to change.
And I've also got half a voice because I've been talking so much this week. So I'm hoping to God that you two will take over from here. So this week, been lots about sentencing.
Well, there has. And I mean, I think there's one case in particular I think really caused a lot of shock. Mm-hmm. Like always you're going to get on social media and reactions to stories a sense that people should be locked up more. We all understand that. Mm-hmm. But there was one case in particular last week of a guy called Jamie Marshall who sexually subjected a child to a horrific sex attack, videoed the thing, and then put it up on social media and walked out.
Oh my God.
Walked out. He also had a huge number of convictions. You probably have the number there.
Where was this guy from, Eimear?
And this guy's from there was obviously restrictions in place, but from the Limerick area,
right.
Yes. And
what age was the child?
It was a boy, so an infant boy was all that was given.
Oh my God.
So, yeah. So obviously a baby, basically, because an infant boy would be referred to as a baby. He had 133 previous convictions, this guy. But there was a range of charges. The defilement of the boy was the most serious one, which actually carries a penalty of life imprisonment. There was also a variety in terms of possession and production of child pornography, and then knowingly distributing it, and also the using communication to facilitate the sexual exploitation of a boy, which basically means that he put it up on this social media channel. It's called Kick, or it's not a social media channel.
But it's kind of something along the lines of WhatsApp or
Telegram or something.
Yeah, and we've heard of instances of Irish people being caught on this in the past, and it was actually the US authorities. It's a network they're basically looking for children that have been violated or missing children, and they saw this communication, and then they alerted the Gardaí, and then the Gardaí were actually able to watch videos and identify Marshall from his tattoos.
Right.
Yeah.
So literally, is there any crime that could be graver, more more
disturbing
abhorrent?
Talk about this.
Yeah. No, it is horrendous.
Despite all of that being proven and even accepted by him, he walked away with, what was the final sentence?
So he got 6 years. So bear in mind that the defilement charge alone carries a sentence of up to life in prison, and then the one for the
distributing the porn thing,
the charges in relation to producing and distributing child pornography carries 14 years, and then you have other for possession of child porn. So bearing that in mind, he got 6 years with 2 suspended, and this guy has 133 previous convictions.
So how has that worked out? Was it explained?
Well, it was basically, they obviously take into account mitigation, and the fact that he pleaded guilty at the earliest opportunity was taken into account, that he cooperated fully with Gardaí as well. That was also taken into account. But it was also backdated. So this guy went into custody in May 2023, which is pretty much a full year ago. So if you factor in the standard remission time as well, which I think is a quarter of the sentence, that means that this guy is going to be out, and my maths is not great, but around 2 years, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so look, he got this.
And can I just ask you before we move on from that, what was the headline sentence?
Well, life imprisonment for the defilement charge.
So he came down from life.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the maximum of what it is. I don't know if he's going to start there.
Because they usually start in a place where they think this particular crime within that crime exists, whether it's sort of up the higher end or the lower end of that. Yeah. So they could, for example, if there was a 20-year sentence on something and it wasn't seen as that, it was, look,
can we say there's varying degrees of sexual assault? There is, and in the eyes of the court, and they will sometimes put, a headline sentence maybe in around the middle bracket there. So they'll start at 10 and then they start moving backwards.
There's a maximum sentence of defilement, but it wouldn't be a standard sentence.
No, it wouldn't be a
standard
sentence.
Would not be for defilement. So,
and
he was given.
I didn't see that now, but the judge. So there was Judge Tom O'Donnell in Limerick Circuit Criminal Court, and he did describe it as depravity of the highest order.
Right.
But he also did say that Marshall was entitled to credit for his, pleading guilty at the earliest opportunity, and also that he fully cooperated with the Garda investigation. And then because he didn't look for bail, he's been in custody, so he did take those into account now. But he also did say, it was vile, despicable, appalling, all of these words. And from what I have looked into, I don't see him starting off with a certain sentence. But obviously, he could have. This was open there.
Yeah.
And defilement, life for defilement probably hasn't ever been delivered. And as Niall said, they take, they start at a certain point.
Yeah.
But, he obviously.
It just feels so little.
It does.
It feels so little. So, I mean, certainly because that maximum sentence is there, but it's how do judges arrive at these things, I suppose. And, normally what they take into account will be previous behaviour, an early guilty plea or a late guilty plea, putting people through on the stand. But it's hard to see why somebody who was caught he was absolutely caught red-handed, effectively, because he produced the video himself and uploaded it. Doesn't it make sense in a legal sense? The judge is acting within the standard way judges act, to give him credit for this early plea. But I mean, is he effectively, a common sense would say, is he pleading guilty early because he's absolutely clot and has no defence?
And he was on video doing these things,
So the state the DPP can appeal a sentence if the DPP believes that sentence is too lenient.
Yeah.
And the individual who gets the sentence can appeal as well on grounds and have their sentence shortened.
And the mother of the child, so the reporting restriction in relation to Jamie Marshall was lifted by the judge, so he was able to be named. The mother of the child had asked that her right to anonymity be lifted as well, but the judge ruled that the child should stay anonymous. But she did speak to reporters afterwards. She delivered a victim impact statement as well, and she did say that she hoped that the DPP would appeal it. She was really, really upset with
horrified, I'm sure,
with the leniency of the sentence.
My God!
But it brings into this debate, I suppose, that people have about what people get in sentencing, and obviously the sentencing in Ireland in beyond this case is something that's of huge public controversy. Obviously the Judge Martin Nolan is always mentioned on our site. I mean, that's a point of public controversy, and then partly because just because people become used to the name, but there's also
Judge Martin Nolan is regularly sort of, members of the public regularly say that he's too lenient on sex offenders.
Yeah, but that's a reputation he has, and also then there is the conviction of people for a range of drug offences is always brought up. So this becomes the point of public debate, where generally people believe that people committing sex offences deserve extremely harsh punishments, and they can see criminals coming before the courts in relation to drug offences and feel these people don't deserve to go to prison to the same extent as a sex offender. And judges sometimes view these things differently.
And is there actual evidence that Judge Martin Nolan is lenient on sex offenders? Is his sentences regularly been appealed by the DPP?
In fact, his sentences have not regularly been appealed and have not. I mean, all judges are subject to these appeals of undue leniency. That does not happen to Judge Martin Nolan. There absolutely is a public perception that he is lenient. That isn't backed up by a range of appeals brought by the DPP. In fact, it was said in recent times, and I don't think there is this great database on these things, but that Judge Martin Nolan is not one of those judges that receives that. Also, it's estimated that during the sitting course, he would give up to 40 sentences a week.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a lot of sentences. That's, a few hundred every few months. And there's obviously some of them catch the public attention though.
Yeah.
And the reason he has become to the public attention is really for two issues. There was the famous case of the guy convicted of not paying tax on garlic.
Aye. And he got to prison.
Yeah, he got 6 years, I think. Judge Martin Nolan delivered that sentence. And at the same time, there was a range of other offences where Judge Martin Nolan had given, certainly in relation to production of child pornography, there was a case of a guy who got, I think it was 7,000 images in a similar time to the garlic guy, and he walked free due to Judge Martin Nolan. And again, people feel like, how can you give that guy 6 years and this guy to walk free?
Yeah, and of course, obviously, none of us are law experts and we're not judges, and they are subject to sentencing guidelines and take case law and all these things into account. And obviously, Judge Martin Nolan is in the Dublin Circuit Criminal Court, which is extremely busy. So that's obviously why he's in the media, because
a lot, yes,
so many of these cases go through his court. But even the ones that I was looking at today, I think I looked at 5 or 6, and the majority of the cases that jumped out at us are Judge Nolan. There was one of a guy, he pleaded guilty to a sexual assault of a teenage girl on a Ryanair flight. And, he got a fully suspended sentence. The judge said that he didn't deserve to go to prison, but I guess people would take the view that while it was at the lower end of a sexual offence, it was still...
What were the details of that case? Were they given out?
That the guy was drunk on the plane. He sat down beside a 16-year-old girl.
Stranger, didn't know her.
Didn't know her. Proceeded to kind of grab at her, attempt to kiss her.
Yeah.
Spoke to her, in very explicit language about what he was...
Kissed her hand and touched her near the breast area, it was said in court, and tried to kiss her hand. And it went on for, I think it was 45 minutes, and she eventually signalled to another person across, who then called one of the airline workers, and he was fully remorseful the next day, I think, once you sobered up. And the judge actually made a comment about, basically, be careful when you drink the next time, kind of thing.
Right.
So,
and he didn't have to produce anything to state that he was taking, he was getting help with his drinking, or...
No, it was a district court case, so it was done...
Well, I think this was circuit court.
Oh, was it? So it was dealt... Yeah, it was dealt with...
Because
quickly.
it was Martin Nolan, so it was circuit court.
Okay.
Yeah. So he drank a bottle of whiskey on the flight, basically. On
the flight, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I heard about that one, actually.
Yeah.
But so basically what I suppose the judge might be looking at there is that, this happened when there was people around, that the individual was drunk. I think probably the remorse thing would probably be one of the biggest factors, would it, in a suspended sentence there?
It would be, yeah. And I suppose when you're looking at, I was looking up these things earlier, and sexual assault is obviously very, drugs are one thing, but I suppose when you have drugs, whereas it depends on the value. But with a sexual assault, there's very different ends of the scale. So obviously this one would be at the minor level, but at the same time, you can get up to 10 years for a sexual assault, and 14 if the victim is under the age of 17, and obviously she was in this case. So no, I suppose it wasn't. He had one previous conviction for assault. But yeah, obviously that was taken, not a sex assault. No, so that was taken into the account, of course.
Yes.
But I suppose people are also thinking, it's, this is a minor. People are thinking about their children. People are thinking about, is this how, I'm not talking about this particular person in general, but, serious criminals start somewhere, and do we need to send out a strong message about these crimes? Like we've seen other ones of, we're actually going to write on Sunday about a guy who exposed himself to children. And he was convicted of that, and he got a suspended sentence, and the DPP have decided not to appeal that leniency, and the families are unhappy. So, we have had these cases come through the courts in recent weeks and months of kind of these sort of exposure, indecency cases, minor sexual assault cases.
And is most of the kind of controversy around the sex offences?
Well, it is, but I mean, I suppose in the same week or within a few days.
Okay, look, the garlic thing is very unique.
But if you look at this, so there was another guy this week, another Judge Nolan case, a guy called Brandon Highfield, he was caught with £500,000 worth of cannabis at Dublin Airport. So he was given a 4.5-year prison sentence for that. Now, he also pled guilty very early at an early stage. He signed pleas in the district court. Judge Nolan acknowledged that his stay will be difficult in prison because he was from the UK. So despite all of that, he gets a 4.5-year prison term. Like arguably...
Quite a lot of cannabis though, apparently.
Quite a lot.
In the airport.
Quite a lot. But, you know, if you consider... So from a legal point of view, obviously, that there is a minimum sentence for people caught with more than €13,000 worth of drugs. It was originally £10,000 worth. So there is a minimum sentence of 10 years for that. And the judges then work back, right? So they'll say then, he was young. Nobody is suggesting he was the prime mover. He was under threat, and he carried this out. And they work back from those 10 years to get, in this case, to get the 4.5 years. But for the general public, they look at that and think, well, okay, it's £500,000 worth of cannabis and this is just some young idiot. And they will think, we'd be happier to have him out in the street than the guy who's grabbed at the girl on the plane.
Done what he's done to the baby.
And
exactly.
And I suppose the thing is, I know you were talking about the man in the plane and how he showed remorse, but there's mitigating factors in all these cases, like the one Niall just talked about. And there was another one in the last week, a guy called Keith Tiswell. He got 8 years for possession of over €3 million worth of cannabis. It was found in the back of a van. And his history was quite... I don't know, maybe tragic is the wrong word, but he was basically described as a drug addict in court. Now, he does have 75 previous convictions, but in this case, he seemed to have been paying off a drug debt, as you hear in a lot of these cases. And there was a lot of his background gone into. The judge acknowledged that while this was a Martin Nolan case, and he acknowledged that while there was coercion and, he could be described as vulnerable, he also did deserve, a strong sentence, and he got 8 years. And then there was another lady as well. She was jailed for 4 years for possession of 200. She was found with 280 grand worth of cocaine in her possession. And so she was holding the drugs for someone. But it went into how, she's been on a program for the last 18 months to clean up her drug habit. And she's a mother, and she got a sentence of 4 years. So, of course, there is sentencing.
She was hoping for a suspended sentence.
Well, I think she was hoping for a lesser sentence. There didn't seem to be any part of that sentence suspended that I could see. And I think it was the same in the Keith Tiswell case. So obviously, these are people that are, holding significant quantities of drugs. Yeah. And, there are families and people out there who have suffered personal consequences of drug addiction and drug dealing. So it's not a victimless crime either. But
it's interesting though, because you do hear those, some of those, I suppose maybe with the drugs in particular, you hear a lot of these circumstances people are in, and they will say, I was under threat. I owe a drug debt. I'm under threat. Okay. Now they present no evidence of that, right?
No.
In many cases, they present no evidence of that.
No.
And it's a bit like, it's one of those things that, what is your evidence going to be? Are you going to bring Mr. Big? Like if you're Barry Young, are you going to wheel Mr. Big into court to say, actually, I wanted to kill him if he didn't pay me back?
Do the guards object to that evidence? Almost never.
Almost never.
No, they don't.
Now, sometimes the guards are called to confirm certain pieces of it. But like in the Barry Young thing, I thought that was really interesting if you look at it, right? Barry Young is running a really big criminal network for a guy based in Sligo, right? He's one of the biggest sort of regional kingpins we have. He pleaded guilty to directing a criminal organisation. Before the lawyers start panicking here, so I'm just banging on about him. But what I was looking at with him was when he was previously caught back in the early 2000s, he was caught with a load of cannabis in this graveyard.
£60,000.
He pleaded guilty at that time. Yeah. He said he owed a drug debt and he was in fear. Yeah. So full circle, here we are again. And same story.
Exactly.
And how do we believe that is the case?
I do totally agree with you. I think in that case as well, you have to take it with a pinch of salt in terms of the gravity of his.
Do the guards as well, which has always said to me that and I'm certainly not talking about the Barry Young case in particular, that the guards give you a little bit of leeway if they get a guilty plea. that you'll be able
element of that.
You will be able to go in and have your solicitor give this defence, and the guards aren't. Now, it's very rare, and I have seen it on a couple of occasions where the guards have actually stood up and said, no, that is not the case, that he was under threat, that this person is a serious mover. But that has always come after a not guilty plea with a conviction.
But you see with, say, Young again, going back to it, and he has this drug debt, right, to Mr. Big is what has been, he's told the court, and he's living in terror, and he has to do all these things. He's all operating almost like a slave to Mr. Big. And then after he gets his 10 years and he goes away to jail with his remission and everything else, the Gardaí travelled to Spain, where they have identified suspected a number of properties, warehouses, etc., owned by him. So if you're living in absolute terror, if I was living in absolute terror of Mr. Big and I owed this drug debt and I had assets, I would probably free up some money to pay him back so as I didn't have to live like a slave. Is that not logical to say that?
It is. And if you were cynical, you could look back on some of the previous cases, such as a guy, what was his name again? Christy Kinahan, where he was convicted with a load of heroin, where he suffered from addiction and he got sucked into this life, and now he's going to prison and he was going to be rehabilitated. And of course, we know in his case, he went into prison and ran the whole thing from a phone. We know that because Dave's phones were recorded.
And got his education. And took that education with him to create what he's created today.
Yeah.
But nobody that's been convicted of a crime and facing sentencing is going to say to their lawyer, oh, say nothing in my defence or say nothing in my mitigation. No. So it's up to the judge and the Gardaí if they want to stand up and object to it. It's up to them to use
to the judge to ask those questions maybe of the defence.
Or is it, should such credit be given for things like that? I mean, that would be the question. That can't be proved, that aren't verified. Like, for example, battling with addiction. I mean, is somebody getting treatment for that? Have they shown that?
Verify that.
I mean, that you can understand that would be something that should be taken into account. This person has completed a treatment and they're now clean and sober for a year. So, and most people would logically say that, but some sort of nebulous threat out there that's not registered with the guards. There's no statement or no evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to wonder, is that logical? No. Like in defence of people like Judge Nolan, like they operate in they have sentencing guidelines. They have precedent where, if there's assaults and over a period of time, the average amount of sentence somebody gets is 2 years. They have to take that into account and work on that basis. And then they have other things that they have to take into account as a part of their job, like potential for rehabilitation has to be taken into account.
Yeah.
So if somebody is, for example, young and, they have a possibility of employment, they have to take that into account, that this person is engaged with services and looks like they want to be rehabilitated. That has to be considered. They have to consider deterrence, but they also have to consider, that on a personal level and on a social level. So, if it deterring that individual, but also they have to take into account deterring like a whole society if there's, violence or whatever. So they have to take these things into account. That is their job. And therefore, they reach what the sentences that they reach. And it's obviously
Do they always explain why they've reached the sentence they have? I'm just trying to think. You're talking about Judge Martin Nolan and he has 40 cases a week. So he's obviously busy, right?
Yeah.
And there's kind of a lot to explain with the sentence, isn't there? Are these judges and others who are criticised maybe as well, without the backup of their sentences being re-examined?
Yeah.
Are they just handing down the sentences?
Well, they do give their judgment, but we're obviously reading abbreviated versions of it as well because we weren't in court for these cases. So he is giving reasons there in all of these cases where he's saying, yes, there may have been an element of coercion, but at the same time, you have these convictions and it warrants a sentence. So they are given, but maybe they go into more detail in the court themselves.
Well, they do. They tend to give reasons for their sentence. Whether and the reason that they have to give that is because those sentences then are subject to appeal. Or could be subject to appeal either from the DPP or from the person that's convicted. So they do give reasons They do give the steps of logic that allow them to reach that sentence in particular, and they have to, because of the appeals process. If they don't give those reasons, then they can't really be appealed.
No.
So they do give them. They do in court. It can be quite brief. They have written judgments as well.
And the barristers for the defendant are obviously have their say recorded in the court copy usually as well. So we'll see what they're saying, and the judge is taking all that into account. But even with the Jamie Marshall one, just going back to what we were talking about in relation to Barry Young and people like that using their, that they were under threat in relation to drug cases, he said, if we look at the gravity of his crime, and I think there was 15 videos of sex acts involving children uploaded on this site, and he said to Gardaí that he didn't have a predilection for children, that it was basically when he took cocaine he turned into a creep. So that's the kind of stuff that
a rubbish excuse.
Does the word creep even cover that?
That was what he was reported as having to say.
Creepy with an adult woman or whatever.
So the judges are listening to all this, and they obviously have to take all that into account.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea that guy got that sentence for that crime.
Go back to him, he had how many 100 and something previous
133 previous convictions.
And what are they relating to?
Also,
mostly for joyriding and things like that.
And he was a thief as well, so a lot of robbery offences. But so he
sort of drug use related offences kind of thing.
Well, a car thief and a joyrider. We haven't looked into his other previous convictions.
They were you could be a chaotic criminal.
Yeah. Yeah, but obviously he had he was acknowledged that he did have a history of drug taking. But at the same time, it's like cocaine obviously has an impact on people, but like the gravity of his offences, there is just no excuse.
There's a couple of 100,000 people probably doing cocaine every week in Ireland, and many of them go and sexually abuse a child. It's a rubbish excuse, and it's not backed up.
How did he get access to the child?
Well, it doesn't go into that because obviously there were some restrictions there in relation to protecting the child's identity. But, the mother does talk about the impact on her mental health. It caused her untold distress. She did say that the child has come on and is doing well and loves cuddles and all that, which is obviously nice to hear. And, we've been told the family just want to move on from it and put it behind them. But, the details of what he did, I think they're actually probably, they weren't gone into significant detail for the report, but they're still shocking.
Would the sentence be reflective of the fact that the judge agreed to have him named? Would that be seen as a punishment?
No, it can be. Sometimes the judges will take into account, for example, that the public shame of a crime. But in this case, that wasn't it. It can be a technical thing as well, to do with the type of charge it is. To us, it's a sex crime on a baby. Like, what does it matter, the technical name of it? But you can see certainly in some historic cases, for example, and that we're not talking about this case in particular, but if they go back many years, the charges kind of changed, and the judges have to try them under that charge that existed. So there's some sort of technical bit about that charge, but I mean, it's like you have to look at that and say, it's just not okay, is it? That he's faced, no matter what.
He'll be out in 2 years. And the mother, her exact quote was, "It's an absolute joke." That's what she said to reporters. And just going back on the charge, I would, like, obviously in my non-expert view, when I was looking at the defilements charge originally, I had to actually look into that and read to see that he actually did abuse a child. Like, it's not one of those charges that would automatically tell you the gravity of the crime, I don't think, is it?
No, it's not. And we don't know how the DPP arrived at that decision that charge was there. Obviously, you're talking about a child. There can't be witness. Can't be a witness. There can't be any forensic evidence. I don't know, we're only speculating, but charges are brought for a particular reason. That's the charge they obviously felt was provable.
It would also kind of reflect if there was medical evidence backup and maybe...
Yeah, And obviously that
wasn't made.
No, for obvious reason exactly. There was months after, I think, that
it was the authorities in the US who spotted it.
Okay, sorry, she would have got away with it totally.
Yes.
Because I actually wanted to ask you about that. I forgot about that. What did you call that thing? Kite or something, was it?
It's called Keek, K-I-K.
So is that just available on the App Store or is it in the darknet?
No, it's available on the App Store. It's equivalent to it's a social media site. It's not.
But it's particularly being used by people interested in child porn.
Well, we've seen cases where it's been used, but I think it can be used generally as well, can't it?
Oh, no, it is used generally, but it was one that they seemed to favour, and there was one that was being used by teenagers, you know.
To send one another
something like
content.
Ordinary content, like Snapchat or whatever. It's not, probably not the social media form in itself. There's nothing particularly wrong with it.
It probably wouldn't be a very safe way to send content then.
No. But like none of them are, of course. And it was, what happened was, it was a social media thing that was being used by kids, but a range of sexual predators seemed to
And who was he sending the content to?
So just to other users on Kik who were obviously, and I'm sure he was getting them as well. It wasn't just of the infant boy. There was images and videos of underage girls as well that were shared by him.
That he took as well?
Yeah. No, well, they were shared.
They were shared, so we don't know whether he filmed them or
they were shared with him by a third party.
Okay,
so I'd imagine maybe that. And I think, is that a thing that, sex offenders, they swap?
Yeah, you're allowed into, they have a private group effectively, and you are allowed into that group if you provide them with content, fresh content. So that is a way it works. I mean,
look, for him to understand that group was there, he's a guy with convictions for joyriding, for theft. He looks like your, classic sort of cocaine using chaotic criminal.
Yeah.
This is a totally different thing altogether. But he already knows where to go to share it, and he has a grouping. So
it takes a certain amount of planning, and I don't know if cunning is the word, but it's not for him to turn around and say, I was just high on cocaine and I turned into a creep. He obviously,
doesn't
as you
wash
said,
it all.
no, it doesn't wash it all.
It's not a moment of madness. And those sites in Kik, like they have those groups where you have to give, by giving that pornography to get into the group, you're automatically complicit, and therefore they believe you're not for example, a police officer, because a police officer probably wouldn't be allowed to do that in order to join the group.
So essentially somebody else got caught and the trail led back to him because of this grouping.
And the tattoo, and they traced it through that.
Right.
But the material was uploaded on Kik, and the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, it's in the US, but they obviously have undercover people on these kind of sites, and they actually, it says quickly alerted them. They were quickly alerted to the material, and then they let the Gardaí know, and then they tracked him down. But he was identified, this was January 2021, so obviously it's taken 3 years to come to court, but they were able to obviously trace him and shut that down. But he did upload
the poor
other
woman and the child. I mean, oh my God, can you imagine the shock of discovering that had happened?
And the trust, she did actually allude to that as well, how, she just, you don't know who
you wouldn't. And like that, I always used to think, I remember when mine were small and they were going into childcare and stuff, and you're like, God, they can't tell me anything like that. They're so vulnerable.
Yeah, they are.
Before they can speak and before they can sort of indicate to you if something's going wrong or whatever. It's just horrific to think somebody would.
Yeah, and I think that's what has, obviously this wasn't a Judge Martin Nolan case, but I think that's what gets, the public animated about him, because, as we all said, there are guidelines in place that the judges have to adhere to, and they're obviously, dealing with these cases day in, day out and going by certain parameters. But at the same time, when it just is so emotive, these cases, these sexual assault, indecence cases, exposure cases, all of these cases of sexual nature, because people are putting it in the prism of, if that was my child.
Yeah. That's it. It is exactly. That's
why should they not do that?
Exactly. Yeah. But that's what caused.
And the sex offenders obviously are all housed in Arbour Hill together.
Not all of them. I mean, a lot of sex offenders are in Arbour Hill, but there'd also be wings in other prisons, like in the Midlands, for example. And
Midlands,
the Midlands, depending on where you're from. I think there's some in Limerick prison as well. But they have to be kept separate from the population. But it is a huge issue.
Mostly the population of prisons feel the same way as we do about them, yeah?
Mostly. I mean, absolutely. I mean, a long time ago they didn't have to be kept segregated, but that is all gone. I mean, they're not tolerated in the prisons. Look, I think that case was really, really shocking, I have to say. And I mean,
haven't heard the likes of that in a long time.
I mean, it's grim. It's just people, you know, how people can do these things. It never.
You hope that these sort of people who are capable of that there's such a finite amount of those people, you know, in our careers, and you guys are watching everything come through the news desk. That has stood out for you. I mean, the only kind of, you know, the other horrible one was that case where those two little girls they were at a party.
Yeah.
And they go out.
Yeah, in the Midlands, yeah.
In the Midlands.
Yeah.
And they were, oh my God. I went down on that story and I swear to God, I wasn't the better of it for a long time.
No.
Traumatizing, I'd say.
Oh my God. Two little girls at a party, the innocence of them, like. He's in jail still, obviously.
Yeah.
He got a lengthy sentence, didn't he? Can we remember that? What he got? I'm sure people know what I'm talking about today.
They probably do, but I don't remember.
To search because I think he has never been named.
Yeah, I think not.
Yeah, but he attacked the two girls and he was caught fairly quickly. But I think he got a long, long sentence for that. There was a lot of emotion around that as well. As there is when it's children. And, you know, I mean, really any of those sex offences are just so...
Yeah. No, you do. And it's just a common, obviously we've gone into a few there, but you know, it's a regular thing for us to turn to each other and say, I can't believe that's all he got, just in general in terms of, you know, and some of them are district court cases as well. So they're obviously the sentencing powers are lower there, but it is a common occurrence. But that one in particular just stands out.
Yeah, it doesn't
there's no kind of...
There's no redeeming qualities there at all.
No.
So, what else, ladies and gentlemen, has been going on?
Well, I suppose for us talking about possible injustices done in sentencing, there was obviously a big story this week in terms of justice finally being done. But it took 4 decades in terms of the Stardust verdicts of unlawful killing by a jury yesterday. So obviously that's been the big story this week.
42 years, was it?
It was
42 years, was it? Yeah. I mean, I think like the Stardust case highlights the fact that why we should be allowed and it is necessary to question the decisions of the establishment. You know, justice has worked here finally. The families, everybody would have heard them talk. The relief they got with the verdict of unlawful killing, but you have to remember that didn't come automatically. There was other inquiries. Those inquiries were run by the state and those inquiries came to the wrong conclusions. Yeah. And it's only through the work of the families of the Stardust victims, using the media, pushing the case forward, that was changed. If they hadn't had that energy, the verdict of the Keane report, I think it was 30 years ago, which said that there was a deliberate arson and all of those things would have remained. So it is important enough to question the decisions of any legal establishment.
But it was absolute torment for them. Like, you think it was 2009 before that was overturned, that the finding that it was probable arson that caused the fire. So that how many years? That's 20 something years, is it?
Yeah.
2009. And then even in 2017, another judge reviewed the case to see if they should hold a public inquiry, and he found that they didn't have any new evidence. And then but the family were really upset with that, but they continued to push on. And then I think it was Senator Lynn Ruane who got the Stardust postcard campaign where they, you know, continued to publicly press for it. And then eventually, I think it was 2020, and they decided that they would hold a public inquiry, but then obviously COVID put that on hold. So it's been a constant battle.
And I noticed that they're talking about, so the criminal investigation is now underway and there may be arrests. Later. But look, do you know, it's travelling and moving along with Bloody Sunday.
Yeah.
2 years ago, Bloody Sunday. And
I mean, like, we'll have Niall Fellerson on next week, who wrote a book about the Stardust. But I was talking to him today and he was saying he was at the 20th anniversary. So that's a couple of decades ago now.
Yeah.
of the memorial, and he was saying there was nobody there. There was no publicity. People had forgotten about it and moved on. And the families at that point were really in a position to think, we're never going to make any progress. So the fact they did is such an achievement. And it's the same. It's the same with the Bloody Sunday.
Same with the Bloody Sunday.
I mean, they were
exactly the same.
They had how many false starts? Many of them. You know, where
and it's like it's the determination of them that they just want someone to tell the truth.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. And it's the same with Stardust, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
they just want the truth.
They just want the truth. And the insults that they had to bear along the way with, the manager of the club at the time, he twice tried to get that possibility of a verdict of unlawful killing taken as an option for the jury. He twice went to the courts over that. And then he hadn't really said anything until he gave evidence before the inquiry. So they had to deal with that. And then they had to just deal with the constant legal issues over the years. And then obviously, like even, in the aftermath of the fire, the Butterley family were given legal compensation from the government because there was a finding of probable arson, and all of these insults that they've had to bear over the years. So it's just
died in the fire again. Was it 80?
48.
48.
Yeah, 48.
I mean, all young people, like it's a huge amount of people to die. Like, I mean, it's
been terrifying.
Absolutely. Some of you were saying about the Irish Independent had the 6 really emotive quotes from the inquest, and it was harrowing reading, like from people, all of the evidence. Like this went on for, was it 90 days the inquest went on for?
I think it was even 100.
So, the evidence was very emotive and...
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Hillsborough disaster, of course, in Liverpool as well. And it's only because there's such a big group of people and, that they managed to get this injustice overturned. And there will have been many injustices involving...
They buoy one another on, I think. Yeah. Because, there's no way you could have kept up your complete determination over that length of time, over 42 years. You've lost a loved one. You're bound to have good times and bad, times when you're feeling energized, times when you're not. So when there's a few, I think that helps somebody is feeling energized when you're feeling wrecked. And
just even like, I remember when I was a young reporter, one of the family members rang me and she was on the phone for, I think it was 2 hours, and my mother was going, come on, we have to go somewhere. But, I didn't want to hang up on her, and she was they're just so impassioned. But that would have been countless reporters. They were just constantly on that trajectory of, we have to get this done. And, even with Antoinette Keegan, she was one of the main people behind driving this campaign. But her mother obviously passed away there in recent years and wouldn't have seen this justice done. So there's a lot of tragic stories around that as well, people that haven't seen this day. But there was one of the victims' families were on the radio this morning, and they are obviously, the next things that they want a apology from the government, a public apology from the state.
And the state have said
Simon
they will.
Harris has said today that he's going to meet them. He wants to meet them in private first, but that's probably going to happen, that there's going to be a full
I think they
apology.
have said now that they will make a formal apology next week. So
that's what the family are looking for next. And then obviously Ken Foy was reporting today about the Gardaí are going to take the coroner's report and look at that in full, that there's no statute barring in terms of, that there is possible, they could be charges taken if that's deemed.
Be amazing, wouldn't it, if that happened?
Yeah.
Joseph Puska back in the news, another...
Yeah, I mean, Joseph Puska, again, like the case we discussed earlier, just one of those cases that will make you despair for what human beings are capable of. But he is launching an appeal. He has been granted legal aid to launch this appeal as well, which I suppose is quite standard. But I mean, I think we covered the case obviously a lot, and his defence was farcical, really. What he put that family through, I suppose we could say at least an early guilty plea would have not forced the family to listen to the harrowing evidence of how Aisling Murphy was killed, and then also the grave insult of listening to his ridiculous excuses. So he's going to appeal.
I mean, legal aid is another thing that sticks in a few people's craws.
Yeah, it is.
But look, unfortunately, we want to live in a democracy, don't we? We ultimately want to live in a democracy, and unfortunately there's these things that you have to suck up
Yeah.
to do that. And one of them is the free legal aid.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Joseph Puska's not a wealthy man. Like, let's be clear,
he's not. But I guess it's just the
idea that the taxpayer has to fund this insult to...
Yeah, which we all know what the outcome is going to be. I mean, there was anybody who, like, he confessed to the murders.
Why are they allowing him to take an appeal then?
Well, I think you're allowed to launch an appeal.
Yeah.
I mean,
in a murder case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean...
Regardless of whether or not...
It's quite common, isn't it? It's very rare for...
Because I thought that you have to be given leave to appeal.
There will be a legal basis. I mean, there's always a legal argument to be made on maybe how the evidence was presented. There was a lot of legal arguments about, for example, the DNA evidence. I'm sure it is justifiable that DNA evidence, for example, could be challenged as part of an appeal, or obviously his confession was given under particular circumstances. I'm sure that could be challenged. It will be challenged, obviously, by Joseph Puska. I think we can say categorically it'll fail.
What jail is he in?
He is in the
Midlands.
Midlands, he's in the Midlands, yeah.
And somebody else I was talking to recently with Eimear about has dropped their appeal.
Daniel Murtagh.
Nadine
Lott's killer, another animal. He absolutely, she was obviously his former partner and he was convicted of her murder, but he beat her unrecognisably. So he has actually withdrawn his appeal. He had launched an appeal, and I think the family were in court to see that yesterday.
So what would that maybe, perhaps, let's speculate a little bit, be about? Would it be a sense of...
definitely.
It's probably fallen down legally, has it? Or is the guy deciding he's not going to put the family through anymore?
I think he accepted the sort of general facts of the case, didn't he? At the time, it was more that he was his mental health was such that he couldn't be held responsible, was how he defended himself.
Yeah.
You don't hear many appeals being withdrawn, though, do you?
You don't.
No, I think there wasn't any submissions for the grounds of appeal. The submissions in terms of the grounds of appeal were opened, but they weren't. Or sorry, there was none heard.
Right, so he didn't present any.
No, he didn't. And then he just asked. I think it was due to be heard, and then that sometimes happens where they just asked the judge for leave to actually. Yeah,
he wasn't going to get anywhere.
No,
that's why it's withdrawn. I wouldn't give him the credit that it was through.
Oh, absolutely no. He's obviously advised. You're taking advice, and he's just told
there's nothing here.
Yeah, but then at the same time, these surely these people know. That I can't speak for Joseph Puska's intelligence, but surely these people know that this is we're
on a road to nowhere, like
exactly, but they still go ahead with it. So there's obviously
they go ahead with it because they're bored as well. You know what I mean? They're in jail, especially they get a life sentence. They go in, they put them on suicide watch for a wee while to make sure that they can cope with the life sentence. Then they kind of focus. They say this themselves. They focus on the appeal. That's the complete focus, and that gets them kind of over the first few years of their sentence, their life sentence. And then they might lose the appeal, and then they might try and find other ways. But it's always kind of working and agitating towards release or overturning this thing that's happened them,
Yeah.
So, an appeal is something to do.
Yeah, it is. And
something to think about. And
yeah, it's a hiding to nothing, I suppose. When you're, I mean, you've nothing to lose, I suppose. It would be the reality if you're Joseph
especially
Puska.
You get free legal aid as well. You don't even have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Joseph Puska. Anyway.
I know. And I suppose going back to the sentencing thing, obviously during his trial, he put forward, as Niall said, there was no sign of any kind of early plea, and he put forward this crazy defence. And the judge, when he was being sentenced to the mandatory life term, said about how, this is an example of why there should be consideration of judges being allowed to impose a minimum tariff on life sentences that they can't get out before X years because of the gravity of what he did and also the insult that he put the family through having to go through this trial. So I suppose that's probably something where if it is to ever be considered like that, there's no stronger case than that. And maybe it goes back to the point of, well, the judges do obviously pass down the sentence. There are, the lawmakers maybe. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a discussion that needs to be had there.
I think there's always
guidelines that are given.
Yeah, but you look, there's been all sorts of kind of we're not on par with other countries at all. We can always do better with the sentencing. I always think in the case of murder, definitely there should be a minimum sentence on that, a minimum time. And I think that's just, we should definitely do that. I don't understand why it takes so long. Obviously, it'll have to be proposed. And there was some stuff come in recently, wasn't there, about, when they can look for parole.
Yeah.
So there was a minimum. You used to be able to look for parole on a murder
after 7 years.
After 7 years, and that meant the victim's family had to come in and sit before them and please don't let him out.
Yeah.
Even though there was a little chance of this person ever getting out. See the way I said he, the woman either. But and that was changed. I think that was extended to maybe 14 or 12 was it?
Yeah, 12 years.
So changes happen slowly with the law, but I think our sentences, the guidelines and all, that whole area has been, I swear to God, I think I've been talking about this and hearing about this since I started out in journalism.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose if the public don't understand it, if the public are, reacting to certain crimes in this way, to the sentences passed down, that maybe it is worth, obviously we're generalising here, but maybe it is worth the lawmakers or the legislators, having a look at the reasons behind why these guidelines are suggested.
Yeah.
Obviously the drugs ones are, there's very not harsher, but there's harsh.
The drug sentences seem so much clearer and you can kind of almost guess them. Do you think?
Well, I think
money laundering and this kind of thing, you can pretty much guess them quicker.
2 to 3 years for money laundering.
The sex offences now you could be.
But this is it.
It feels like a lottery. I mean, it's probably not, but it just feels like that.
Well, I think,
and I suppose there's such differing ends of the scale though as well, isn't there? So I suppose it's hard to when you're caught with drugs or caught with drugs.
Yeah, no, you've a good point with that. Exactly, it's the amount of them, and it is just one thing you're caught with. It's not. Yeah.
I think with the production of child pornography, for example, that the judges really have a large body of precedent there that people are very likely to get suspended sentences for that. And I think that is something that really horrifies the public. And that is just the way it is. I mean, I don't know. The drugs thing, of course, was brought in, the 10-year minimum sentence at the time of John Gilligan, if you remember, because of the public outrage to do with the murder of Veronica Guerin, effectively, and that people felt that a lot of drug criminals, which they had, if you look back in the 80s and 90s, people walked free from drug charges all the time, got suspended sentences, and that was brought in then on the back of kind of public outrage. So that is a way how it works, but definitely the production of child pornography or the use of it, which people find abhorrent. The courts don't seem to reflect that, I would believe, and I think you can see that every week in Ireland.
Yeah, but even repeat sexual offenders, we have and Anthony Goodman. He's been a regular in the Sunday World over the years. I think he has 200 convictions for sex related offences. But in terms of he's exposed himself on public transport, and there's been various different instances like that. But he got it was a jail sentence, but I think he was owed time already served, so he didn't serve very much time, and he's back out again.
That feels just like revolving door then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it was basically breach of the sex offenders.
His history of convictions would be for
including bestiality and everything,
Yeah.
So I mean, but it's even.
And he's out.
Well, it's that he repeatedly has breached his release conditions.
Has he been released?
But he was released, so we were writing about how he was back up again, and then the following week we realised that he'd actually been released in the meantime because he got a very small jail sentence, but he'd already served.
He breaches these conditions and he's put straight into jail, and he's
out again.
He's clocking up his time before he ever hits the courtroom.
But you just have to ask the question about somebody like that, and obviously, there's reasons why you can't just lock somebody up and throw away the key, but you also have to ask about somebody who is a danger to the public. Is there something else that needs to be done here? Because it is a case of a revolving door of, he's very likely to reoffend, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I don't think there's much.
In our own small way, we do what we can by writing about these people and putting up photographs of them. So at least, if people are kind of online, they will know what they look like and avoid,
Yeah, he got a 1-year sentence, but then he was he's already out again, so...
So and apart from all that, any plans for the weekend?
We have to put a paper together tomorrow, don't we?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just so happy we're not on the road with the show this weekend.
Oh yeah.
But it was great though, wasn't it?
Great,
Kerry was great.
Kerry was absolutely great, yeah. Which is Belfast now next weekend, but it's nice to have this weekend sort of not having to hit the road.
Yeah.
And anything else? Have you any little tittle-tattle tales to tell me about him?
No, I think
I caught him going out with a fancy lady.
Did you? Did you get your glasses fixed? I meant
No,
to ask.
I tell you what though, I've slagged Nicola before about her musical choice. About going to Rick Astley and Deacon Blue, and I have like the big bomb. It's coming up.
He's not
I'm not going to be able to say it yet.
He's not allowed to say anything until I'm safely.
Once she is gone,
until I'm safely home.
Yeah, because I might. No. Taylor Swift would be cool.
I've been to Taylor Swift.
Have you?
I'll have you know. I'd love to go this.
Once she goes to this concert and it's done and she's back home safely, I might just do a whole series. It might be a podcast series.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do if I go to this concert. I'm going to take so many selfies and everything just to prove I did.
Who is it?
We can't say.
Can't say. No, it's a big secret.
Okay.
Big secret.
Right.
Put it this way: you think of the top 5 least cool acts in the history of the world.
Well, this is me we're talking to, so I don't have a very high standard.
He just thinks he's so highbrow when it comes to music.
Well, it's all relative.
Just because he likes Cure.
He thinks he's so cool, doesn't he?
It's all relative.
With his tat, we can see your tat.
I know, we were giving you stick about that. But I'm going to have an easy day tomorrow now, Nicola, because the last 2 Saturdays, Niall's been off trying to make a name for himself, and I've been the one left.
You didn't get too many offers, did you?
No, just or have I learned to keep quiet about them?
Oh, maybe. Is that what's happened?
No, I just didn't get the offers.
I was just going to say. Well, he couldn't believe that there was.
There's still Belfast, which is really where you really shine, isn't it?
I don't know if Niall and Kerry were a match because he couldn't believe all the country type dancing that was going on in the Glen Eagle
ballroom
Hotel. And I was like,
dancing
do you
going
not know what happens in that?
Yeah, I think he's booked in to go down himself another time. He was fascinated with it. There was ballrooming.
They might invite you back.
Ballroom dancing going on in the Glen Eagle Hotel. The Glen Eagle Hotel, which I've never been in before in my life, is quite phenomenal place. It is unbelievable. It's like a sort of a factory.
Well, it's like a mini Vegas.
Mini Vegas, Ian said to me, and I was horrified. I was like, what? Is this what Vegas is like? Can't remember. I thought you'd go to Vegas to meet Bradley Cooper, but I've watched The Hangover too many times. Anyway, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's
the hotel that never sleeps.
No.
Yeah. I'd say it's one of those places where Niall would definitely get upstaged by Daniel O'Donnell because that would be.
There was a Garth Brooks tribute band on as well, and he was dying to go to that, but he couldn't because he was needed. His presence was needed on stage in our little room. But really phenomenal the amount of fun people are having down there, and I mean it seems to be every day of the week.
Yeah, I mean
300 every day. Like Christmas Day, everything. There's just these shows and it was quite amazing. You should go to these places and have a look and see what it's like.
I love Clarny.
It's not hidden Ireland, but it's like real Ireland or something, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's great, and it was great. It was a great show we had, and people were really, really nice.
Hundreds of people were at the ballroom dancing. Forget about our show.
Yeah, that was where the fun was.
Dressed up in these, outfits that literally must have cost them a fortune.
Oh, really?
Women and men up to and probably over their 80s. And it's one of the sessions starts at 3:00 in the day. They go to that for a couple of hours. Then they have their dinner. And then they go back in for the nighttime session, at 2:00 in the morning. There was hordes of people all dressed up coming towards me in the lobby. And I was like, where did you come from? Ballroom dancing.
Oh, it's huge.
I mean,
yeah.
Just to come from all over the county to go to it. And
all that, but even, Katie dancing, set dancing, line dancing, there's a huge appetite for that, all around the country. So
we should just get out more. We
should get out more.
I just don't think it exists when we're living in Dublin.
No, I was just saying they're living the life. Why wouldn't they?
Sure are. They sure are having a great time.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so you can have your weekend after tomorrow.
After tomorrow, yeah. I'm actually going to Clare for a few days on Sunday. I'm going to leave Niall.
Oh, very nice.
Niall to
West Clare?
I don't actually know. It's Spanish Point, is that?
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know what part of Clare
that's a beachy place, so it has to be the West.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Really nice.
Niall can look after them.
And like you're going to get the weather, I hope.
Yeah, it's going to be 17 degrees apparently. I know. It's funny when you're talking.
It's kind of jammy, isn't it, that you take that time off?
Yeah, it's when you're getting excited about 17 degrees, but
I know.
it is Ireland.
It's been better. Like it's definitely, at least.
Yeah.
We're all miserable from the long winter. Right, well, we'll come back next week then.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nicola.
All right, thank you.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.